In this video, we explain how LiDAR data can be analyzed using second-generation wavelets. The LiDAR set in this showcase is from a scan of a fragment of the Great Smoky Mountains, also known as the Blue Ridge Mountains. Both position and attribute information, in our case geometry and vegetation classification plus the height above ground, are considered in the following experiments. The downsampling operation, which we now showcase, consists in extracting details and generating a hierarchical sequence of representations. We'll start with the input set, which has the highest density of about 5 points per square meter and a size of 280,000 points. In each step, we randomly select 25% of the points and extract them via wavelet analysis. We focus on what happens to the intensity of the details. We need to track the evolution of both landscape and vegetation layers. We notice how the contours become more blurry as the vegetation formations fade in some regions, and also how the creases and ridges that were initially present tend to disappear and also fade away as we decrease the resolution. What if we define a measure of importance for each point instead of randomly deciding whether it gets extracted or not? In the left window, we illustrate how the features evolve by naively and randomly selecting points, while in the right window, we introduce a heuristic that encourages the elimination of points in regions with little variability. We can see that discriminating between points aids in keeping a contrast between the terrain features, while eliminating them naively leads to most of the features fading away with scale. Please notice the light green vegetation formations and focus on what happens to them during a sequence of 7 downsampling steps. In this case, the vegetation formations will be better preserved by using our heuristic, and in the left window, where we use a naive approach, they are either smudged or simply removed. Notice the isolated regions of light green or higher intensity green shades, which correspond to individual forest or shrub formations. Since the contrast is better kept, our heuristic experimentally outperforms the naive approach of extracting or labeling nodes. For example, notice these regions where we can still have a perception of vegetation contrast. To have an even better understanding, let's consider the trees and shrubs as part of the geometry. That is, we alter the heights of the points by the height above ground of each vegetation point. Notice how isolated sharp features are eroded pretty fast in the process, while the heuristic cost tries to avoid eliminating them. At the end of the process, we can clearly see how the features in the right window better stand out instead of being diminished, as is the case within the left window. For example, notice the spikes over here, here and here, which illustrate the selectivity of our heuristic method. Also, individual features are better represented by using our custom cost. To help the algorithm understand geometric variability, which a human can do but a computer cannot, we conceive the cost based on curvature energy. Depending on how much a certain region is deformed or bent, we assign to it a value, which we then use in the feature discrimination process. In this heat map representation, notice the creases, ridges, or grooves being colored in shades of green, whereas flatter regions are tinted in shades of blue. This helps the computer understand where salient features are located in terms of the geometric domain. For example, these grooves or road formations over here, which are dominated by shades of green. The neighbor regions tend to be colored in shades of blue. Other regions are colored in light green, and they usually correspond to mountain tops where the bending is higher. The drawback of a curvature-based heuristic is its sensitivity to noise. By adding artificial noise to the height component, we can clearly see that the geometric selectivity is no longer present. This is due to the high-frequency noise being interpreted as uniform variations in the terrain's geometry. Now, the algorithm is incapable of distinguishing between real geometric features and artificial noise-induced formations. This is reflected in the uniform light green shade the terrain is now colored in. We explored an alternative to curvature-based measures. One of them is the conformal factor, which provides a segmentation of the mesh in terms of how far a local region is from lying on a sphere relative to the whole terrain shape. Although more robust to noise, this measure cannot single out details because of its global meaning. Thus, when noise is indeed present, it doesn't outperform our curvature cost, since it might incorrectly discriminate between small features. For example, in this case, we see the same noise-altered terrain being colored in terms of the conformal factor. We notice the blue region, which was also present in the original set, and the green shades surrounding it, and also the red shades, which have eroded a bit. Finally, our most interesting analysis byproduct is the set of detail vectors. After each downsampling step, the extracted details are stored as difference vectors. The information stored this way corresponds to different frequency bands of detail. From fine to coarse, we expect the majority of the difference vectors to first correspond to small vegetation formations or small rock formations, for example. As the influence increases, the details will correspond to small hills, forest patches, or other large-scale terrain components. Through the use of our lifting scheme design, we aim to minimize difference vector magnitudes. That means we try to avoid both the loss of features and increase in the lower resolution approximation error. In this point cloud representation, each point shares the same x-y coordinates with a point in the inertial set, whereas its z component, the height, is given by the difference vector magnitude. This magnitude can also be seen as a measure of a local feature's importance in its frequency band. For example, we can notice the difference vectors corresponding to both vegetation and ground layers, as well as their heights or magnitudes with respect to the ground level. In the left output window, we can see the average difference vector magnitudes as the resolution decreases. Please notice how this magnitude increases as the set becomes less and less dense. The RMSE, or root mean square error, also increases. This is the approximation error. This fact demonstrates the link between detail magnitude and approximation quality.